You're standing in the dense rainforest of ancient South America, maybe 60 million years ago. The humidity is suffocating. Every step forward is deliberate because the ground beneath you could give way at any moment, not because of terrain, but because of what's beneath it. You feel something you can't quite articulate yet. That feeling. The one that makes your skin crawl, that sends a message directly from your reptile brain to your limbs: stop moving. Ahead, coiled around a tree branch that's as thick as your torso, is a creature that doesn't belong in any reality you've experienced. Titanoboa. 40 feet long. Maybe longer. The color of rust and oil. It doesn't move, but its presence moves something inside you. You're not supposed to be here. Everything about this moment tells you that. But here you are, and the calculation happens in seconds. Do you run, do you freeze, or do you do something else entirely? This is the scenario that's captured human imagination for generations, the idea of ancient people coming face to face with giants. Apex predators that make our modern fears look quaint. But here's the thing that nobody really talks about: humans survived not because we were bigger or stronger or faster. We survived because we were something else entirely. We were capable of something that Titanoboa, despite all its size and power, could never be. We were adaptable in ways that went far beyond simple instinct. For a long time, the narrative around prehistoric human encounters with megafauna has been shaped by this image of brave hunters with spears taking down woolly mammoths or saber-toothed cats. Incredible moments of courage and coordination. But the reality is messier, more psychological, more human than that. When we talk about surviving encounters with giant snakes, or any apex predator from that era, we're really talking about something much deeper. We're talking about how the human mind works under extreme pressure. How our social structures kept us alive when individual strength would have gotten us killed. How simple tools combined with pattern recognition created survival advantages that raw power could never touch. The truth is that Titanoboa wasn't actually hunting humans in the way we imagine. It couldn't have been. The timing doesn't quite work. Our species, in any recognizable form, didn't exist when Titanoboa was at its peak. But the principle remains. Ancient humans did encounter massive constrictors and venomous snakes that could kill them. They did find themselves in situations where running wasn't always possible, where hiding wasn't always an option, and where their lives depended on making the right decision in seconds. And they survived. Not all of them, obviously. But enough to continue the species, to pass down knowledge, and eventually to develop the kind of detailed understanding of animal behavior that allowed humans to dominate every ecosystem on Earth. So how did they actually do it? The answer reveals something unexpected about what it means to be human. It's not what the survival shows will tell you. It's quieter, stranger, and ultimately more profound. Let's start with the most obvious thing that nobody really wants to think about: fear itself. When you encounter a predator, something that could kill you, your body doesn't consult your reasoning brain. It goes through a cascade of responses that were designed over millions of years to keep you alive. Adrenaline floods your system. Your pupils dilate. Your hearing sharpens while your peripheral vision expands. Blood rushes away from your digestive system and toward your muscles. This is the fight-or-flight response, and it's as old as fear itself. But here's where ancient humans had an advantage that most animals don't. They could recognize the fear response itself. They could feel their own heartbeat, notice their own breathing changes, and instead of being controlled by those sensations, they could interpret them. This distinction matters enormously. When a wildebeest detects a lion, it runs or it doesn't. Its fear response is locked into 2 or 3 basic behavioral programs. But when an ancient human detected danger, something more complex happened. They could think about their fear. They could use it as information rather than just a command. Consider what this actually meant in practical terms. Imagine a group of early humans gathered near a waterhole in Africa, maybe 100,000 years ago. Someone spots movement in the tall grass, something large. The immediate response is the same for everyone: adrenaline, attention focused, muscles ready. But what happens next is different. Instead of scattering, they stay close to each other. They watch. They whisper. They create a shared narrative about what they're seeing. That's probably a python, one might think, based on the pattern of movement. Another might recognize the coloration they glimpsed. They don't panic as individuals, they think as a group. And that collective interpretation, that cognitive collaboration, fundamentally changed the survival calculation. This is where social intelligence enters the picture. Humans didn't survive dangerous encounters with apex predators because they were individually clever. They survived because they could communicate. Because knowledge could be shared. Because a close call that one person had could be turned into a lesson that protected everyone else. Archaeological evidence suggests that information transfer between generations was occurring at least 100,000 years ago, probably much earlier. That's not just helpful, it's transformative. A young human didn't need to personally encounter every danger to learn how to avoid it. They could learn from stories. From demonstrations. From shared cultural knowledge about where snakes lived, what times of day they were active, what patterns to watch for. Here's where it gets interesting from a psychological standpoint. The human brain is extraordinarily good at pattern recognition, but only if we're paying attention. And we're far more likely to pay attention to information that's embedded in a story. Evolutionary psychologists call this narrative transportation, the idea that our brains are literally designed to absorb and retain information that's delivered in the form of a story. So imagine an elder in an ancient community telling a young person about a close encounter with a massive constrictor. Not as a lecture about snake behavior, but as a narrative: what happened, what went wrong, how it could have gone worse, what to do differently. That young person is absorbing crucial survival information not as abstract rules, but as a story they can see themselves in. Their brain is literally priming them for the scenario. When they encounter a similar situation years later, something in their pattern recognition system will activate. They'll remember the story, and that memory will guide their behavior. This is one of the great underappreciated advantages of human intelligence. We're not the strongest predators. We're not the fastest. We can't see infrared like a pit viper. We can't move as silently as a snake. But we can transfer knowledge across generations with remarkable fidelity. We can embed that knowledge in stories. We can refine it, pass it on, and watch it become part of the cultural understanding of a group. That's not just useful. That's the foundation of civilization. Now let's talk about the second major advantage: tool use. And I don't just mean spears. Every human who has ever walked into dangerous territory has used tools to extend their awareness. A stick to probe before you step. A torch to see into dark spaces. A drum to make noise and warn away nocturnal predators. These aren't the dramatic stories we tell about hunters taking down prey. But they're probably far more important in the context of avoiding predators altogether. The psychology of tool use is fascinating precisely because it's so simple. A stick isn't just a tool, it's an extension of your arm and your mind. It creates psychological distance between you and a threat. You're not touching the grass directly, you're probing it with a stick. You're not in the dark, you're extending light into it with a torch. These might sound like minor distinctions, but they're psychologically crucial. They allow you to engage with danger in a way that doesn't flood your system with fear. You're investigating rather than confronting. An investigation requires a different cognitive state than confrontation. There's research suggesting that ancient humans created a variety of tools specifically designed to deal with snakes. Forked sticks, for instance. The fork prevents a snake from launching forward past the tool. It creates a mechanical lock that allows a human to immobilize a snake without getting close enough to be bitten. Is this tool a weapon? Sort of. Is it a piece of clever problem solving? Absolutely. And this kind of tool-based solution appears throughout human prehistory, across different continents and different eras. The moment humans learned that a problem could be solved with an object rather than with direct physical confrontation, something shifted. Humans became far more dangerous than their strength alone would suggest. But here's what makes this psychological rather than just practical: once you understand that a tool can solve a problem, your fear response changes. Knowing you have a forked stick changes how you perceive a snake encounter. You're not helpless. You have agency. That shift in perception, from victim to agent, is psychological, but it has real effects on survival. You're more likely to think clearly. More likely to execute a solution rather than panic. The third element is something we might call cultural risk management. Ancient humans didn't encounter predators randomly. They developed patterns of behavior that reduced predator encounters altogether. And these patterns were social and cultural, not individual. In many ancient societies, certain areas were simply avoided during certain times of day or certain seasons. Knowledge about where snakes were most active, near water at dawn and dusk, for instance, was accumulated and became cultural knowledge. Young people were socialized into these risk reduction behaviors. You didn't just learn that snakes were dangerous, you learned the specific ecological logic of where they were and when they were most threatening. This is where human behavior intersects with human intelligence in a way that pure survival instinct can't match. A wildebeest herd doesn't plan to avoid a location. But a human group can. They can create a map, literal or mental, that incorporates dozens of small pieces of information about predator distribution, seasonal patterns, and risk. This kind of thinking requires what psychologists call executive function, the ability to plan, to coordinate with others, to delay immediate gratification or curiosity in favor of long-term safety. And it's fundamentally human. Now, let's get to the counterpoint. Because the story I've been telling is somewhat incomplete, and intellectual honesty requires acknowledging that. The truth is that ancient humans didn't always survive. They didn't always make smart decisions. Fear sometimes won. Miscalculations happened. Groups split up when they shouldn't have. Young, curious individuals ignored the warnings they'd been taught. And yes, people died. Snake encounters weren't always successful, from the human perspective. What we don't know is the frequency of these encounters and their outcomes. We know that snakes existed. We know humans existed in overlapping spaces. But we don't know how often actual lethal encounters occurred. It's easy to create a narrative where humans are constantly fighting for survival against apex predators, but that might not be accurate. Most ancient humans probably spent their entire lives without ever seeing a titanoboa or a massive constrictor. The dangerous snakes they did encounter were probably smaller, more manageable, more avoidable. And most of the time, when humans encountered snakes, the snake was more interested in leaving than in attacking. This is a crucial point because it changes the frame entirely. Humans didn't survive because they were constantly battling predators. They survived because they were good at not battling predators. Because they could read situations and avoid confrontation when possible. Because they could live in a landscape that contained real dangers without being dominated by those dangers. That's not the story of a warrior species. It's the story of a species that learned to navigate risk intelligently. There's also the question of scale. A constrictor snake, even a large one, has genuine biological limits. It can't swallow prey larger than a certain diameter. It can't move quickly through dense vegetation. It has metabolic constraints that mean it doesn't hunt continuously. Understanding these limits, and they probably did, through observation and storytelling, made humans far less vulnerable than the image of an ancient human facing off against a giant snake might suggest. Humans could recognize a snake that was actually a threat versus one that was simply present. That discrimination is cognitive and cultural, not instinctual. And here's something else worth mentioning: humans probably hunted snakes. Not as their primary source of food, perhaps, but snakes are protein. Large snakes even more so. And a dead snake is a snake that won't hunt you. This creates an interesting inversion of the predator-prey dynamic. Humans, through intelligence and tool use, could become predators of the things that might have preyed on them. It's not a direct confrontation, exactly, It's often a dead snake that's being processed. But it represents a kind of cognitive dominance. Humans learn to think about snakes not as unavoidable dangers but as problems that could be solved. So what does all of this mean? What's the actual answer to the question we started with? Ancient humans survived encounters with giant prehistoric snakes, and with countless other predators, because they possessed something that no other animal on Earth possesses to the same degree. Not superior strength. Not superior speed. Not superior senses. They possessed the ability to understand their own fears, to share knowledge across generations, to create tools that extended their capabilities, and to think strategically about risk. They could observe a situation and imagine multiple outcomes. They could tell stories about danger and learn from stories about danger. They could work together based on shared understanding rather than just shared instinct. These capabilities didn't emerge fully formed. They developed over millions of years. But once they were in place, once humans had the cognitive capacity for narrative, pattern recognition, and planning, the equation shifted. Humans went from being prey that happened to have some interesting cognitive abilities to being the apex predator that other animals had to worry about. The deeper implication, the thing that ties this back to the original question about what it means to be human, is that we survive not because we're exceptional in the way we typically think about exception. We survive because we're exceptional in how we think. Our intelligence isn't primarily about individual genius or individual strength. It's about collective intelligence. It's about our ability to store information in our minds and in our cultures. It's about our capacity for abstract reasoning and long-term planning. And it's about our willingness to share what we know with others, even at personal cost. When an ancient human decided to teach a younger person how to recognize snake patterns, how to move safely through dangerous territory, or how to construct a tool for managing a snake encounter, they were engaging in behavior that's fundamentally different from anything else in the animal kingdom. That knowledge transfer, that cultural accumulation, that's what allowed humanity to not just survive in a world full of predators, but to eventually dominate it. The snake in the grass isn't the real story. The real story is what happened in the minds of the humans who encountered it. Their ability to think, to remember, to share, and to plan. That's what carried us through. And that's what made us, against all the odds suggested by our physical capabilities, into the most dangerous predator the world has ever seen. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where you had to think your way through something instead of muscling your way through it, you've experienced exactly what allowed ancient humans to survive. You've drawn on the same cognitive toolkit that kept our species alive when we were surrounded by creatures far more physically imposing than we were. That's not trivial. That's worth understanding, because it tells you something about who we are and why we're still here.